Welcome to Internally Guided Life, a podcast to help you unlock a life of balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back, my friends. I have Emily here with us today for a long overdue exploration of the shadow. And if you've been following us for a while, you'll remember Emily from the 4-part series we did on exploring the heroine's journey, which was phenomenal. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, highly recommend go back and listen to that whole series. Functions like a workshop, so bring a notepad and a pencil. You'll have a lot of things you want to take down. But Emily is back with me today to explore the shadow because this is something we referenced a lot when we were doing that series, and we didn't get a chance to really dig in. And it's something that we had multiple requests to come back and explore. So after much delay, we are back. So Emily Nascimento is here. She is my soul sister, my friend, and just an amazing soul to know is on the planet. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with her. Welcome back, Emily.
Hi, I'm happy to be back. Thank you. I'm really excited for today.
It's going to be fun and probably a little unexpected for both of us. We just never know where we're going to go until we get there. So,
hmm
do you want to give a really brief introduction, who you are, what you do to anyone who maybe hasn't tuned into the series?
I'm laughing because I'm on day 3 of my cycle, and I'm naturally a philosopher, and I love to just kind of like wax poetic. It's just a part of my nature. And being in this part of my cycle, it's just like extra dreamy and extra poetic. And so I'm laughing because I always struggle with this question of who are you? And at this point in my life and in my journey, I really feel like everything that I thought I was is kind of falling away and revealing more and more of what just my intrinsic natural essence is. So, on like a big meta level, I don't know who I am. I'm figuring her out. But on, a little bit more of a grounded level, I'm a coach, I'm a leadership coach, embodiment coach. That's kind of my jam. I love conscious leadership and embodied leadership and really diving into and exploring the mysteries of soul and psyche and how that reveals ourselves to ourselves, and then how we can authentically create outcomes that matter in the world through our leadership and our service and our actions and our behaviors. And so that's what I do on this planet, on a more functional level, but who I am, it's kind of unfolding. I'm meeting her every single day.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we always are. I asked that of somebody else recently, and she was like, well, who I am right now is going to be very different than who I am 2 minutes from now. So this is a
Yeah.
hard question to answer. But we just need the like what's arising in the moment. And
Right.
yeah, I think it's so much deeper of like it's such a deep question. It's so much more than just what do you do? But I think people are curious about that part, so we usually go there first. But
Yeah.
I mean, we could be anything.
hmm One of the things that I've been playing with when I meet a new person is instead of asking them what they do, I ask them, what are you about in this world? What do you care about?
Mm.
I find that brings really interesting conversation right from the beginning, and then maybe that leads into what you do. But those are the kinds of questions that I like to occupy.
I love that question. What are you about? Yes. I love it. I'm
Yeah,
gonna steal that. That's gonna be the new question I ask at the beginning
please
of the
do.
episodes.
There we go. Just
Okay.
bring the soul right in from the very beginning.
Yeah, from the start. No need to beat
Yeah,
around the bush. I
yeah,
mean, if people are listening, they know what they've gotten themselves into.
yeah. That's the soup that you and I like to sit in.
Yeah. Okay, so here we are after all of this time to talk about the shadow. Let's create a framework, a structure, before we dig in and get like just really deep. Let's provide some bones for this conversation. How do you relate to the shadow? I'm gonna lean on you to start with your definition, and then I can always add in.
Hmm. So I think just right off the bat, I want to give a caveat that you and I are Jungian enthusiasts, but
Yes.
we are by no means experts or analysts to that degree. So, um, for me, I relate to the shadow. It feels important that we kind of define a couple of the key terms in Jungian psychology because they all fit together. So I think I want to start actually with the ego. And I think I mentioned this in the last podcast series that we did, but I feel like ego needs a rebrand because I love the ego. The ego is such an important part of our psyche, of our function, of our ability to survive in the world. And Jung saw the ego as the center of the field of consciousness. It contains our conscious awareness of existing and living in this world, and it's the place that stores our continuing sense of our personal identity. Like this is when we say, I am this.
Mm.
The ego, that's housed in the ego. It's the organizer of all of our thoughts and our intuitions and our feelings and sensations. And it has access to all of the memories that exist within our psyche that are not repressed. So I think it's important to look at that before we go into shadow, but I want to give you an opportunity to say anything that you want to say about ego before I go into shadow.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up because yes, we are Jungian enthusiasts. That's a great way to put it. I'm very influenced in my work by Jungian psychology, by
Same.
no means an expert. And I think, we all kind of put our own spin on things to make them work for us. And it kind of interfuses with all of the other things that we have immersed ourselves in. So you're gonna get a version of it that is unique to Emily and I today. But I 100% agree. The ego does need a rebrand. The ego is what allows you to answer the question I asked at the beginning of the
Right.
episode, right? Like
Exactly.
without awareness, we have no organization. I mean, we would just be like, kind of floating and ambiguous. It gives us our personhood. It gives us our autonomy, our personal authority. Like it's a really beautiful and powerful piece of us. It's just the reason it's got a bad rap is because sometimes it shows up in ways that are uncomplimentary, but that's life. Like that's that's all of us. We have these pieces that maybe aren't examined that influence the way the ego shows up. So it's not the ego's fault what's in there. It's just what's in awareness.
Exactly.
It's neither good
Beautiful.
nor bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the work that I do in this world is to support the maturation and ripening process of the ego because ego development is such a powerful service and agent for soul and for spirit and for leadership. And when we can consciously engage in the development of our egos, we can be more congruent, more aligned with what we say we care about, with what we genuinely care about. And that's when leadership can become embodied. It's no longer this aspirational thing that I want to do, but it shows up in how I behave and interact with the world because I'm purposefully developing my ego to be able to support that. And so I love the ego. I feel like so much of my work is around the ego, and I just so much respect. So that's, that's what we could say is like the light of consciousness. And just like with all archetypal polarities, there is its opposite, which is the shadow. Um, and before we go too deeply into this, I just want to say that I believe our episode today is focused primarily on the individual shadow, but just acknowledging that shadow can exist on many levels within family systems, relationship systems, organizations, nations. It would be really fun to unpack that with you some other time. But uh,
Yes.
yeah. So the personal shadow is the disowned self. It represents the parts of us that we no longer claim to be our own. Like we want them to be as far away from us as possible. But this includes positive qualities too. So these are just unexamined, disowned parts of our personality that hide within us. And they come out in ways that don't intend for them to come out. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you want to say about the shadow?
Yeah, I think the shadow for me, and I was so surprised, I think, when I first started getting exposed to all of this language and the the way that Jungian psychology kind of contextually gives this framework, right? Because these aren't physical structures, they're psychological concepts to help us make sense of the way that our brains function because they're so complex and there's like all of these interwoven dynamics. But what I really loved about the shadow when I started to get into it is the potential for our creative expression and for our strengths and our hidden gifts to emerge once you start to look at this. So it is all of the things we've denied. It is all of the things we've repressed. It's also just the things we haven't acknowledged in ourselves or we have an easier time recognizing and praising in other people than like owning and developing for ourselves. So there's also just like this untapped wellspring of potential in the shadow. And so it's not just like you said the dark stuff. It's not just the stuff that we've labeled bad. It's just also this uncharted territory where we haven't explored fully yet.
I love the idea of it being uncharted territory. For me, that evokes this sense of exploration and adventure and wonder. You know, it's like, ooh, what am I going to find down there?
Yeah.
And we'll get into this as we go dive deeper into the shadow after we define a few more parts. But I think that there's so much fear around starting to dip our toes in the shadow that we never really get to access that potential and all of the energy and the aliveness and vitality and skill and strength that exists within the shadow when we keep it so far away from our conscious awareness and our work. So I yeah, just deeply, deeply appreciate and admire the shadow for its potential to remind us of our wholeness.
Yeah. Well, and that's like the whole reason people do shadow work, right? It's to embrace the wholeness of who we are and to see and accept and love and integrate all of these parts of ourselves in a way that is authentic and meaningful and can allow us to operate in the world without causing harm unintentionally. Like it brings our personal responsibility to the forefront.
Hmm. Exactly. So, moving on to some of the other parts, I would love for you to talk about the self because I know you've done a lot of work on the self and how it relates in leadership. So, would love to hear your riff on that.
Yes. So the self, my favorite. I actually did my thesis on internally guided leadership, and it was basically the self that I was exploring. And I did explore it in relation to all of these other, conceptual pieces that we're unpacking for you. But the self is essentially the internal guiding leader, guiding force, and organizing function of the whole thing. So it gets to carry all of it. It carries your shadow, it carries your ego, it carries your persona, it carries everything within it. It's like the circle on the outside of everything that you are, but it's also at the very center. And so there's some duality within this concept of the self, which I love, things that are ambiguous and not quite not quite clear. So I'm all about it, but it really represents that wholeness and embracing all. And it's also, when I speak of it as a leader, it's this guiding force towards what Jung called individuation, right? Like it's constantly moving us towards what we need to keep growing, keep developing, moving towards our highest self. So it's not passive by any means.
Mm, beautiful. I love that image of the circle with the center because what it makes me think about in the context of leadership is when I can be in touch with both the widest, biggest, most expanded aspect of myself, the self, I have access to so many tools and skills and values and wisdom and just like energy that can be utilized for the creation of outcomes that matter. And so when you're tapped into that outer circle, you have so much available to you as a leader to be able to lead in this world meaningfully. But also, likewise, at the same time, you are centered within yourself, within the center of the circle. So there's a groundedness to it. It's not just like the kind of expansion where your feet aren't on the ground. You're actually like centered and present and right here. And right here is where real change happens. And right here is where we can actually make those outcomes happen. And so I love this like image and even the embodied sense that it brings into me to be imagining this big giant circle with this centered, grounded anchor within it. Uh, that just evokes like a sense of possibility and wonder and clarity and focus too.
Yeah, it almost feels like the gravitational pull in the center.
Mm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it is grounding you. It is keeping you where you need to be. And it's also like the atmosphere
Yeah,
surrounding the whole thing. It's
gorgeous.
yeah.
So then what is a persona?
So that is our social self. That's the part of us that we are choosing to show to the world. And it's kind of the mask that we put on. And we can have many different versions of this based on who we're showing up to and where we're showing up and what the social norms are in those environments. The persona is highly aware of how it's being perceived. And so we all have it, and it's not a bad thing. We all go into work environments, religious communities, family structures where we know what the norms are. We know what's going to be labeled good or bad. We know what is and isn't acceptable. This allows for like social order.
Hmm.
Um, so the persona is all of that. So the persona is really mindful to not maybe show certain things that it knows won't be accepted in that particular domain of operation, wherever you're functioning at, right? And what's beautiful about the persona is I think you can, if you intentionally develop it, you can create very authentic persona where you're still aware of the social norms. You're not causing complete chaos, but you're also not divorcing from all of the authentic parts of you. And I think that's sometimes a bridge that people have to cross because if you're just showing up in a certain way in each setting and it's like there's a different version of you depending on who you're with and it's not in alignment with who you really are, with your values, that can feel really uncomfortable and really exhausting. So it can kind of go one way or another. That's a very lengthy explanation, but that's kind of how I relate to the persona. Is there anything?
Yeah. I'm thinking of you were talking about how you can develop and you can take care of how the persona shows up, how and the different versions of yourself that you bring up depending on the context and what it's calling from you. And I think about that a lot with the purpose program that you and I both went through several years ago. We went through different layers of dissecting purpose. There was the reactive purpose, which is like how I think I need to be and how I show up in order to get my needs met. And that kind of feels like a little bit like the immature persona. It's
Yeah.
highly reactive, it's unconscious, it's kind of just like you're a ship in the like being blown around in the wind. Whereas then there's the next level, the creative purpose or the self-authored purpose. And this is when persona can be very intentional. Like I know that when I'm showing up as a facilitator, I'm going to gather certain parts of my personality that I have learned over time that bring more results, the results that I'm looking for. I will bring those together and that will be my facilitator persona. It's very different than when I'm sitting down on the couch having a cup of tea with a friend,
Mhm.
And so but that's still it's self-authored, it's creative, it's I'm like there's a certain level of responsibility and power and influence that I have over that. And then I'm wondering, like, this is total thought experiment right now, but the next level of purpose is a soul authored purpose. It's when you actually let go of who you are, this mask that you've created and curated for the world, and you step into just essence. And I'm wondering if that, like, what you would think about that with the relationship to the persona, or are we getting more into soul and self territory at that point?
So for me, that almost feels like a full integration, right? Where
Oh yeah.
the persona maybe isn't standalone anymore and it's just so fully integrated, your whole personality that you are showing up with less I don't know, less variance in different settings because you've done that work and you're carrying all of these parts with you wherever you go. I don't fully know what that would look like experientially because I'm very aware of the social situations. I'm a very empathetic person too, so I find myself even when depending on who I'm talking to, even on the podcast, I'm sure the listeners notice that depending on who I'm talking to, I can lean into different parts of my lived experience to
Mhm.
relate with the person in front of me. And I love that But also, it means that there's always some pieces that I'm bringing and some pieces that I'm not. And it's semi-intentional and semi-unconscious, right? Some of it's just like reading the person that I'm speaking to. But to have persona like reach a soul level, it feels like it would be an integrated piece at that point. And that's not from any research. That's just me thinking in the moment.
Yeah, same. That's why I'm like, this is just a thought experiment. I
Yeah.
would love to get a like a legit Jungian analyst
Yeah,
perspective on that.
for sure.
All right, how about anima and animus?
Yes. So these are essentially the feminine masculine pieces of our psyche. And usually you think about them in relation to the opposite of how you are identifying, because it's showing the opposite of what you might be socially conditioned to show up as. But it's your feminine masculine. So if you're identifying as a feminine person, then you would be relating to the masculine part of yourself. And there are different pieces of that that we can project, especially in our romantic relationships. So these kind of dynamics of what we're expecting from our inner feminine, our inner masculine, show up a lot of times in our romantic relationships, and they they can also create this bridge for like integration and healing and allowing both to be equally present with ourselves, because usually we've socially conditioned some of this stuff out and we've pushed it into the shadow realm. Like we won't own certain things in ourselves and then we project them onto other people, and we create all of this chaos. So this piece is really that yin and yang kind of balance within our psyche. What would you
Love that.
add? Yeah.
I would add one of the things that I've been experimenting with is, and I'm going to invite this into this conversation, is to not look at this as a binary, but as a polarity, and that it's not like a binary to be solved. Like, your expression and experience of the world could be anywhere along that spectrum, and so it's less of a problem to be solved and more of a polarity to be integrated. And so when we can look at the polarity and we can explore everything that exists along that spectrum, and we can bring that into ourselves and integrate it into a part of our experience of the world and the way that we relate to the world, that's just a deeper layer of wholeness. So I'm really exploring things that appear to be opposites as more of polarities that need to be integrated instead of the opposite of the thing that I'm searching for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not like a versus
Yeah.
or yeah, or a one or the other situation. It's really this like dynamic relationship that is playing off of each other and both are needed. And yeah, they both need love and attention and integration.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the visualization of a spectrum here too, rather than like there's so many places within that we could show up in any given moment. And I think it's just always interesting because society does socially condition some of this in or out of us. So
Super.
we may be more in touch with certain feminine qualities because society has told us those are okay, and other feminine qualities we may totally divorce ourselves from because we've been told those are not okay, or those make you appear emotional, weak, whatever. And same with our masculine qualities. We might relate to some of those things as dangerous, or we might put a negative spin or connotation on it and shy back from it when really that's like our power, or our leadership capability, or our
Hmm.
organizational potential. Like there's so
Hmm.
many things within the whole spectrum that you can explore. So I love that image.
Hmm. Yeah. Gorgeous.
So now we've created a framework. We've got this very large contextual thing we've just painted for you. And for everybody listening, you do not need to have a full understanding of all of these pieces. It just felt right to give you the framework that shadow exists within, especially from a Jungian perspective, before we really start to unpack this thing. So I think that gives the framework. Is there anything you want to add before we just start digging in deep with the shadow?
Yeah, one thing that I want to add, this is less of like a structure and more about a function. So I want to talk about projection because I love projection. I mean, we hear this is part of our like everyday nomenclature, right? You're projecting onto me or they're projecting onto you, but I want to like take a moment to really explore what projection is. So the idea with projection is that there is some deep and enduring part of our psyche that holds the memory of wholeness that we were born with. It holds the memory of wholeness. And in an effort to bring us back to this place of wholeness, the psyche will project shadow aspects of itself onto the external world so that we can become aware of them and integrate them back into ourselves. So, projection is actually this deeply nourishing, beautiful function of the psyche to bring you back to wholeness, which I think is just so fucking gorgeous. Like, wow, the fact that it does this for us, that it's wanting us to come back into wholeness. And so it's putting these things in front of us as little mirrors for us to be able to remember ourselves. I just find that to be so beautiful. And I have a lot of love for this function of the psyche, and I can't wait to talk about how it shows up in shadow work. But yeah, what do you have to say about projection?
I love the way that you framed this up because you're right. We do hear about it a lot, and I think it's often used with a negative connotation
Hmm.
without the functionality of it being really explored. And that's something that I think pop culture has missed and its embrace of this word and this function. Um, yeah, because it allows you to see in the world, and it's your like one easy access point to get to the shadow. Like it is
It's
your bridge.
it's amazing. It's amazing. Like if you want to know more about yourself, look at what you're projecting
Hmm.
because it is just like the quickest way back into yourself and into your
Yes,
shadow and into your work,
100%. So I think
which we'll get
that's,
to.
yeah, that's 100% the piece that I love the most about it. It's like it's a tool, it's a mirror, it's a function. It's all to bring you into deeper awareness, deeper responsibility. You know, we talk about the self or conscious leadership, any of these things that we're really striving towards, and projection gives us a function of ourselves to get there. And there's not a lot because when you're trying to explore the unconscious, like you have to find ways, you have to find like little threads that you can grab onto. Otherwise, it's just all mystery, right?
It's just like the dark matter of the universe. It's like, yeah, try to grasp onto that. You
Yeah.
can't. Like you need bumpers, you need a doorway, a portal of some kind, and
Hmm.
projection is the quickest way there.
A portal. I love that.
Hmm.
Yes. It's projection is your portal.
Yes.
We go. Okay. So we understand maybe somewhat at this point the what lives in the shadow. Let's talk about how this function of our psyche develops across our lifetime.
Hmm. So I love the way that Robert Bly describes the shadow, the personal shadow in his book, The Long Bag We Drag Behind Us. So when we're really, really young, like 1 or 2 years old, we had what we could visualize as like a 360-degree personality. It's just energy that radiates from all parts of our body and psyche. And if you've ever seen a young child running around, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're just this living globe of energy. And one day we noticed that our parents don't like certain parts of this ball of energy that we are. It might be things that they say. It might even just be the way that they like shift their body or a slight way that they change their face when we do something. But we start to learn things like, children are to be seen or not heard, or can't you be still, or it's not nice to hit your brother, those kinds of things. And so Bly says that behind us, we have this invisible bag. And all of the parts of us that our parents don't like, we put in the bag in an effort to keep our parents' love, which is actually required for our survival. So this is a very intelligent response of the psyche to put these things in the bag. And by the time we go to school, our bag is growing and our teachers add things to the bag, like good children are to be quiet when the teacher's speaking. Or I remember there were all these like games that they would try to play to make us cooperate. Like if we went so many days without an incident, then we'd get a pizza party, like those kinds of things. Like we're being
Mm-hmm.
trained from a very young age to stuff our bags full of things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what creates our shadow. And everyone's bag stuffing experiences are different. And it's really dependent on the context that you grow up in, the cultures. Different cultures encourage different things to be stuffed into the bags. And so it's very unique and individual to each of us. And we spend our life until we're in our 20s unconsciously putting parts of ourselves into the bag, banishing them into the wilderness back here. And then if we're so lucky, something wakes us up and we spend the rest of our lives trying to get them out again, trying to unpack them, trying to love them, trying to remember wholeness. And so while this whole process seems like a little mysterious and kind of ethereal and maybe a little bit scary, Carl Jung, so the person who like put words around this whole human experience, says that the shadow is the doorway to the real.
Mm.
Like this is where real wholeness exists. And it therefore is absolutely worthy and deserving of our attention and our knowing of how this function works so that we can start to bring realness back into ourselves and into the way that we interact with the world.
I love this description, and I'm glad that you grabbed the visualization from Robert Bly about
Yeah.
the bag, because I also think this helps you to understand some of the ways that this impacts us, because the more things that have been shoved into the bag over the years, the heavier it becomes, and the more it slows you down, and the more it makes your journey rougher and it impacts you. And so hence wanting to examine and pull some things out. There's always going to be certain things in that bag. Like this bag's coming with you to the end. But if it's light, it's easy. Like you can navigate the world really freely. You are very mobile, you're adaptable, you can access all kinds of things that you need when you need them, and you're just managing, little pieces as they arise, in an exploratory way. But when your bag is full and you're dragging this around, like it really has a very real impact on the way you operate in your relationships, in your life with yourself. It slows you down. It makes you tired. It hurts your soul to be carrying a super heavy bag. So,
It takes a tremendous amount of energy. And I'm wondering, Kayla, if in your experience in working with people with burnout, like where does shadow work come into it? Because I imagine that a great degree of our personal burnout comes from not integrating shadow work.
100%. Yeah. So it's funny you ask that. I was just thinking of like the framework I use to pull people through the burnout experience, like moving from that into like purpose and passion. So kind of taking from the burnout to the other side of it. And the first stage is the very broad thing that I call inner work. And that includes shadow work and thought work and inner child work. So a lot of those
Mhm.
things are what you have to unpack first. And I always encourage people to, like, depending on what might be in there, they may need the accompaniment of a therapist as well.
Mhm.
Just depending, because trauma is in the bag. So depending on your personal lived experience and the extent to which you've put things in there because of safety, you may need additional support beyond a burnout coach, But you're completely right. It's the pieces that we've shoved aside that lead to the burnout, to the exhaustion, because we're showing up in the way that we think the world wants us to, and we've so tuned our personalities and our behaviors to what we think everybody around us wants from us, the people at work, the people at school, the people in our family, that there is very little energy left for our soul, for our nourishment. That's not out of the bag. Like
Mhm.
we've like self-care is in the bag. Like that's labeled as something that is bad or selfish or whatever. You've labeled it. You've put that somewhere else. Your relationship with yourself, not a priority. Put it in the bag. Like you become this this highly over-functioning person that is so tuned to what everybody else wants and needs and so disconnected from yourself, from your body, from your physical and emotional and relational needs. So, yeah, there's a lot there.
So much to unpack there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And like, if we're not talking about collective shadow right now, but there are some of these themes that exist on a collective level that you're talking about and
Hmm.
a systemic level. And when it exists, the amount of energy that it takes for a system to push something into the shadow is insane. And like I imagine that this our psyches are feeling that pressed upon us all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it changes the way people function as a group. And I loved the way that you brought in how unique the shadow is based on context, because I think that is such an important piece of that is, your family norms, your community norms, your school norms, your social norms, where whatever cultures that you've interacted with and interfaced with, like you can have this multi-tiered, multi-layered conditioning effect that's happening. And that doesn't just happen to people. It definitely happens in organizations. I think of organizations that have toxic cultures. They
Yep.
have really big shadows.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that'll be a fun episode for us to unpack together.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to add about kind of how this is developed before we continue to deepen our exploration here?
I mean, there's so many threads that we can pull, but I think just for the function of brevity and clarity, that feels like a good enough place for us to transition into what shadow work actually is.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be fun because the reason that our shadow is so essential and why Emily and I are obsessed with it is because it is such a beautifully functional piece of ourselves that allows us to operate in the world with more authenticity once we learn how to work with it. But that's not an easy task because it is in our unconscious. Like we have to find ways to get there, those portals, as Emily mentioned. So, yeah, let's dig into how we do shadow work. What is this concept? Give me your version of it.
Okay. So these parts of our personality are usually banished into unconsciousness when we're really young, which means that these shadow parts of ourselves often remain in a very instinctive and primitive state. And so I heard this example from a This Jungian Life podcast episode. So I want to give them the shout out that they deserve. But if you might imagine that as a young boy or a young person being told that anger is bad and unacceptable, so you banish your angry parts off to the woods. And those parts grow up in the woods with other wild things, having never been socialized. And so then when you become a leader and you're given the feedback that you need to be more assertive, you try to call back this part of you. But since it's never been civilized, it shows up as this roaring primal aggression. And that doesn't actually help you in your leadership. And it might create collateral damage that you weren't intending. And so the ego, that the conscious self, does not have a conscious relationship with these parts. So it doesn't have conscious control over how they're being used or called upon when you do need them. And the part of the personality, like that, it doesn't have a sophisticated form. So shadow work really just means bringing these parts of ourselves out of the wild, out of that long bag that we drag behind us, and giving them to a place to exist in our conscious lives. We have to give them the opportunity to grow up, to mature, to become socialized and civilized so that we can access the strength and the gift and the vitality that exists within those parts. Um, I'm trying to think of like an example that I have from my own life. So one part of I call this the golden shadow. It's just like the positive qualities, right,
Yeah, I
of our
love the
part.
golden shadow. Yeah.
Yeah. So creativity was a big one for me. I actually remember a very specific time in my 20s when somebody asked, I was dating an actor and I was hanging out with a bunch of theater kids and somebody asked me like, "Oh, what do you create?" And I was like, I'm not creative. I don't create." And
Mm.
at the time, and looking back, I see how wrong that was, or like inaccurate, but I just didn't own that that was a part of it. And I was so enamored by creators and by artists that I had the glowy, sparkly eyes. Like I was like hero worshiping them. And that's
Mm.
projection.
Yep.
That is projection, projecting this like beautiful, glorious, expanded quality on another person and being like, oh my God, I love that, and being drawn to it. But it was because I wasn't owning it myself. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until I started to integrate how I'm creative, maybe not in the ways that I had grown up believing creativity is expressed, but I had to explore that for myself so that I could start to bring it in a sophisticated form. And developing a relationship with my creativity is something that I'm still consciously working on maturing what that creativity shows up as. I could go more into that later, but that's kind of like a high level example of what shadow work has looked like for me in this aspect.
I think it's really important that you like pulled in the example because I think that's what makes this thing go from like really abstract and not making any sense to feeling like real and practical. And
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful example with your creativity. And I think one that will resonate with a lot of people too, because I feel like that's a really common one to be in the bag. That we're carrying behind us that we're
Hmm.
not calling ours, that's something that other people do and we don't, and that's a part of us that at some point in childhood we have access, and then at some point in early adolescence or maybe even sooner for some people that gets put back there because we're told that there's no room for that or we're not good at it or whatever it might be. And so it kind of brought up some additional examples, so I'll just layer on a little bit to give more of a textured like understanding of how this can actually show up. So for me, I'm thinking on the positive side, um, like leadership qualities was something that I would have never owned. I would have never called mine. And yet, definitely something that I had to mature and create a relationship with once I kept finding myself in leadership roles because I had no idea what it would look like. It was I loved the example of like they're in the woods, they haven't been conditioned, they haven't been told how to function, and now people are calling you manager or leader, you've got this title. And all you know are the examples that you've seen of what that's supposed to look like, and some of them are really bad. And so you have to pull it out and you have to let it grow up. You kind of have to like tend
Yeah.
to and caretake that part of you. What does leadership look like for Kayla? How does that get integrated into everything else? And that's an ongoing process. But playfulness was another thing that was deep in my bag. Like cut it off. I had to grow up early. There were responsibilities, there were things that needed to be done. Kayla was the responsible one. Kayla got straight A's. Kayla made sure the kids got to school when mom overslept. Like there was no time to mess around, to be playful. And I had to rediscover that in my mid to late 20s. Thank goodness for my husband, for being the goofiest man that's ever existed, because he helped me to see what that could look like in an adult and like re-access that. So there's all these great things in there, and shadow work can pull those out. But there's also like anger. There's certain emotions that we put back there. Like anger felt very unsafe for me. And I would never have said I felt angry for probably at least a decade of my life. I just completely disowned that I could even feel that emotion. I don't get angry. Like bad people get angry, mean people get angry, people who hurt people get angry. Kayla doesn't get angry. Kayla actually had a lot of anger to deal with. Um, and that's where the shadow work came in, right? Like
Yeah.
owning, integrating, listening to the wisdom of that shadow emotion. Yeah, there's so many things we could pull out, but I think these examples might be relatable.
Yeah, I mean, I relate super hard. I'm still figuring out the whole play thing. Like, I'm a very serious person at times, and I get so triggered when people are silly when I think that they need to be serious. And I think that I want to come back to that about like how triggered I get because that's a part of the shadow work. But there's that one, yeah. And then what was the one that you were just mentioning
Like
after play?
anger.
Anger. See, I so
You
disown
did.
it. I completely forgot what you said. But I remember when we were in grad school in our emotional intelligence class and we were working through Miriam Greenspan's work.
Yep.
Um, her work is primarily on despair and fear and grief, I think, but I used it to support me through anger because I was the same way. I still have a very challenging relationship with anger. I also have a challenging relationship with disgust. That's
Mm,
a hard one because like I feel like disgust is also like a function of projection where it's like I need this thing as far away from me as possible. It is poison.
yeah.
And like the level of like visceral reactivity that I feel when I experience disgust is like, okay, there's something there for me. I need to take a look at this.
Yes.
But it's still the thing with shadow work is like you could be aware that you have a shadow aspect that you need to work on, but you still might not have a full understanding of what that is because it exists in the subconscious, in the unconscious. It's deep, deep, deep down in there. And so while I can tell because I'm viscerally reacting to something that that is a shadow aspect that I need to look at, I might not understand that whole function and relationship until I start to go deeper into the shadow work.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that's coming up for me listening to you speak, like, I think part of, and this might take us on a total tangent. So here we go.
Let's go.
Um, this is something I've been thinking about, but I think part of the reason it feels so inaccessible for us, even if we recognize something's there, like to actually do the work, to engage with it, to tend to that relationship, to nurture and care for and develop that part, there's a lot of protective functions in our brains that keep us from doing that because there's so much in the bag that could hurt us, and all of the stuff is in the bag to keep us safe in the first place. So, like, getting in there and messing around can feel very dangerous for a lot of parts of us. And I've been thinking about the intersection between between shadow work and internal family systems, and the way
Yes.
that these different functions, these different parts, like our protector parts in IFS, are keeping us from going into the shadow often because they know there's stuff down there that's going to hurt, that's going to be hard to deal with, that's going to be really painful. And so you have to like befriend, like it's like this layered approach. Like you have to befriend these parts of yourself that are really protecting you before you can get to the like true exiles, the
Hmm.
parts of you that have been so repressed that you don't even have access to them because the protectors are like keeping them under like, they're behind closed doors. They're in the cave somewhere back there, you know?
I'm so glad you brought up IFS because I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about trauma, because IFS therapy has been critical for me when it comes to successfully navigating shadow work, partially because IFS therapy is about developing the core self. It's about having a strong, um, the words that are coming up are like you need to develop stamina for this level of work, and you need to have a self with the endurance to be able to hold this work. And that's what IFS therapy brought for me was that strength and sense of self and a relationship with my protector parts that was demonstrated over several years of doing IFS therapy, that I'm not here to get rid of my protector parts. I'm actually here to thank them, to understand their role, their function, how they do this, what they're protecting, why they're protecting it. Like, I want them to be a part of my council of elders that are sitting, like, we're all here talking about what's best for Emily today.
Yeah.
And, maybe I want to go into the exile. I want to go into the wounded inner children. I want to go into the shadow. And so I'm going to call upon some of my other protectors and my guides and my wise parts for support through that. As the core self, I'm going to be navigating that. I'm going to be in the driver's seat, but I'm going to have all these allies with me,
Yeah.
including my protector parts, my managers, and my firefighters in the IFS world.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the reasons we're seeing like such a like surge of IFS therapy is because it gives people a way to actually do shadow work that's more tangible,
Yeah.
and it's in a supported environment. Because there's a lot of ways to do shadow work, and we'll start talking about those in a second. But IFS is a super powerful one, and it was one I even like looked into in my research when I was thinking about how do we integrate shadow work into leadership development. And IFS is one of the most practical evidence-based practices to show us what
Hmm.
that could look like. And obviously, it would be different in an organizational context than it would in a therapy session. But there's some real powerful, tangible steps that can be taken to start to make peace with these parts of yourself and to build these nurturing relationships and to integrate rather than like banishing and continuing to exile and adding more and more stuff to the
Hmm.
bag.
Hmm. Yeah, and just to put like a finer point on that, IFS therapy is one route. Young practice active imagination, which is another version of parts work, general parts work. There's also focusing that was popularized by Eugene Gendlin. I'm trained in focusing, and it's more of a somatic base to parts work. So, there's several different avenues into the different parts of your psyche that you can start to build relationship with. And I want to emphasize that you build relationship through consistent attunement and attention to these parts. You can't just like dive in like the Kool-Aid man and be like, "Hey, I'm here. And I want to know my shadow. So like, what's up? Where are you at?" Your psyche has developed its protector mechanisms for a very long time, and it's not going to let you do that. So you like you have to show sincere attunement and acceptance and attention for these parts, and with that attitude of compassion and kindness and curiosity, in order for the protective mechanisms to start to soften so that you can access that unconscious material.
Yeah, you have to build a trusting relationship with all
Yeah,
of these parts of yourself. Like they're not gonna let you in because you came in with force.
right. No, definitely not. All right. So I want to just pause here and like talk about why would someone want to engage in the shadow work? So
Yeah.
you and I, we're very, we're little Jungian nerds, and so we love this stuff. But like, why would someone want to actually do this? Do you want to kick us off on this, Kayla?
Yes, this is a great. I'm glad that you reeled me in a little bit because it is important, I think, to help people understand like why are we doing this episode? Why are we so
Yeah.
excited about this? Clearly, this is hard stuff, takes a lot of time. There's a lot of junk in there. Like this isn't easy. It's not fun. I mean, if you're Emily or I, it might be kind of fun, but it might not always feel fun on the surface. Um, but it's because of some of the things that I think we were alluding to earlier when it comes to integration and getting to the place where we are more whole in our sense of self. And we are pulling these things carefully out of the shadow and into light so that we can be fully who we are. So we don't feel like we are this social construct walking in the world. Um, because I think a lot of people feel that way. Like they show up as all the ways they've been told to show up in all of the settings, and they get to a place they're like, why does this feel wrong? Like I'm doing everything I was supposed to do. I'm doing everything everyone told me to do. Why don't I feel like I even know who I am or what I want? Shadow
Mhm.
work helps bridge that gap. Like shadow work is pulling in who all of you is, the all of the parts into this one universal, powerful whole that is complex and multifaceted and filled with potential. Like once you unlock this, you're not dragging this heavy bag behind you anymore, and you have the energy you need to commit to a life of purpose and thriving and show up with full responsibility and intentionality in your relationships, in your work. Like it just unlocks doors that you didn't even know existed before. It reduces conflict in your relationships because you're not just constantly projecting without any awareness that that's what you're doing. It helps you understand how other people might be perceiving you or what hurts, what wounds are getting activated in situations that need internal tending that we have to own. Like there's just there is so much. And then there's the golden shadow stuff, right? Like we talked about that a little bit already. Like when we do this work, there is so much untapped potential in there on who we can become and what we can do and who we can be and how we can show up and playfulness, creativity, confidence. Like those things might be in the bag. If they're in there, we want to get them out so that we can show up in our full capacity. So those are some of the reasons that most resonate with me. Add on to that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple that I'm going to double click on because for me, like vitality is so important. And like I feel like that is a big theme of my life is my birthright for vitality and aliveness and my ability and desire and willingness and capacity to experience life more directly. all of life. And this is a part of why I love grief work so much, because grief brings us closer to life. And I want to squeeze every drop of aliveness that I can out of this life. And shadow work allows me to be able to do that more directly. And, building off of that wholeness, I can't tell you why, but the archetype of wholeness has been something that I've been drawn to my entire life. And it feels like that is the most important thing in the world, on this planet, in my soul, in the universe, is wholeness, and to be able to see and feel and experience wholeness. And I know I cannot do that if I don't do shadow work. If I want to know what whole, real, vital, alive life feels like, then this is something that I need to do. Um, and again, it's like the ability to be completely present, to be this like state of peace and equanimity that I think so many of us long for, of like true self-love, of self-acceptance and self-compassion and happiness. I think can only be experienced when we have touched and hugged and invited in these shadow aspects of ourselves, when they can be as much of a guest in our house as joy or love, or, any of the other things that we perpetually seek outside of ourselves. I personally feel like this is the key to genuine, real, authentic love, connection, life experience. And I can't tell you why, but nothing matters to me more than that. And that's so I think that's why I'm so drawn to this work, because it's like it's the fringe parts that people don't necessarily always run to right away, but it is like the turnkey. It is the tipping point for me.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you like explored in a little more depth the aliveness piece, because this really is life. Like this is what it is to be alive with all of it, the full experience.
With
And
all of it.
yeah, and doing this work creates greater capacity for complexity, for the ability to
Yes.
navigate ambiguities, to be able to recognize that there are more than one, like more than one thing can be true at once, and they can be on opposite sides of the spectrum, because all of these things are happening within us. And once we can start to acknowledge and make peace with and integrate and love that complexity within, it becomes a lot easier to relate to that complexity in our world, in our workplaces, as it
Yes.
emerges with other people.
Which naturally brings us into the like how important shadow work is for leadership. Like
Yeah.
if you're looking for a performative edge to your leadership, do your shadow work. Because not only does this unleash loads of energy and intuition and deeply embodied presence, but like you were saying, when you can hold and be with and have the stamina and the endurance for the complexity of your own psyche, you can have that for the complexity of those systems that you're operating in, and the places that you're leading in. And one of my favorite, our favorite teachers on leadership is Bob Anderson. And one of the things that he says about leadership and shadow work, I'm actually just going to read this quote because I couldn't say it more beautifully as he says it. He says, as this internal capacity matures, we become more powerfully and compassionately present. We become more able to intuitively access and work with subtle information and energy. And because we can hold the full complexity of the self as a microcosm of the system in which we are a part, we become more able to hold in constructive dialogue, the complex, discordant, functional, and dysfunctional elements of the systems that we lead. And in this fiercely compassionate dialogue, we catalyze coherence, breakthrough innovation, reconciliation, and transformation. This is the magic of leadership. This is the stuff that when we're innately drawn and magnetized to a person, to a leader, It's usually because they have embodied their wholeness in a way that we're really drawn to. This is like the elder that we're all on some way looking for, and that our psyches have developed over millennia to expect upon being born. And it's only recently in our human history that we don't have initiated elders who have done this shadow work, this ego maturation work to be the leaders in our communities and in our families and in our politics. And so this is the edge for genuine, true transformational leadership that takes you to the next layer of our evolution.
Yeah.
Period. Mic drop. Like that's all that there is to it, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. This is the key.
Yeah, this is the work of leadership. And I love that you started with the competitive edge because this is what makes it matter to people enough to do it. But I will also add, in a little bit less fun of a light, if you are serving as a leader in any kind of capacity in your community, in your workspaces, this is also your responsibility to
Yes.
minimize your harm that you're causing.
Yes. Thank
Um,
you. Yeah. Like this is about integrity and taking responsibility for the outcomes that you're creating. And like you said, minimizing harm because we've all experienced leaders who have not done this and have experienced the harm of that.
yeah. Yeah, it's just something that you have to commit to. And even if you're not in a formal leadership space, what I looked at a lot in my research on this was like the way that we are all leaders of ourselves in our lives and that self
Hmm.
leadership piece, because it's also very irresponsible to be operating in your own life in a way that might be leading to self-sabotage or repetition of toxic patterns or um, unlived potential,
Hmm.
ungifted gifts, like all of the things that get lost when you don't do this work in your own life that you it's your birthright. It's the reason we're here. It's incredibly irresponsible not to do this work, even though it's hard, because we need it and we need leaders at every realm and domain of our existence in our households, in our communities, in our workplaces, in our politics. Like, we need people who have done this work and who can interact in a way that is really for the good of all. And that's what this allows you to do. It's your full aliveness, so there's personal benefit for sure, but it's also much broader with positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, I might say that this is the key to your fulfillment in your own life, whether you're self-authoring just your life in general or you're leading in some more official capacity. This is fulfillment and it's also influence and it's that beautiful intersection where your personal longings and the world's greatest need intersect. And this is how we become capable of living in coherence with that.
Yeah. And that purpose, that alignment that awakens when you are able to do this, it's just indescribable. I think once you've started to tap into it, you can't get enough. And that's why Emily and I get so excited about this because you start to get tastes of how potent life can be when you are in this space and how powerfully transformative relationships can be and how organizations
Yeah.
can become places where people actually thrive rather than
Right.
showing up and doing what's on their job description and counting down the minutes to the weekend and acting like they're two separate selves, the work self and the home self. Like we're whole beings wherever we go. And this allows us to do that in a way that actually feels in alignment with life.
Exactly.
It's so good. So, is there anything else that you would add on the leadership component? Or shall we start to just deepen a little more into engaging with shadow work?
Yeah, I think anything else that I would want to say about leadership, I want to save for when we do like the more collective shadow stuff. Um, yeah, I think
Okay.
we can move into engaging with the shadow work.
Yes. Okay. So I would love to hear from you. How do we engage in shadow work? So we've talked about some modalities, we've talked about some access points. What are your thoughts on this? How do people start and how do we get supported in this work? I think is also part of this conversation, right? Because I think there is like real psychological risk.
Hmm.
So yeah, let's dig into all of that.
Okay. So just to recap, one of the ways that was a couple of the helpful modalities that we've talked about were IFS, parts work, active imagination, focusing. Those are all great and helpful. And I also want to remind us of that psychological function of projection and how that functions as a way of mirroring back to us aspects of our wholeness that we've rejected unconsciously. And so it's trying to bring us closer to our whole authentic selves. So the process for engaging in shadow work is to first identify a projection. So, identify a person or a group that you feel disproportionately charged towards. So, this could mean that you are negatively or positively charged by them. So, you might be really repulsed by them, you judge them, those kinds of things, or you might be super attracted to them in some way. They're just like, frothing at the mouth, like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with you, like that kind of thing. So, identify the person or group that you're feeling this charge towards, and then identify the actual projection of it. So, what is the specific quality or aspect of them that you feel so charged for towards? And I would spend a lot of time here, like, get really curious about the words that you use because the word is going to have a charge to it that you're going to feel viscerally in your body. And if you don't feel the charge or the word or charge towards that word, you probably haven't nailed it yet. So just a couple things that I know that I'm still actively working towards. Some shadow words that I feel like I have a lot of charge towards are like lazy. Lazy's one for me. Phony or flaky. I haven't quite landed on the word yet of but there's something about like not being 100% real there that
Mm.
feels shadowy to me. Um, Airheaded, that's one. Distracted, those kinds of words. Those are all shadow aspects of mine that I'm working with. And so getting really curious about what is that quality or aspect that makes me feel so charged and just write about it. Like stream of consciousness, 5 minutes at minimum. Just write, 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 write. Make sure your pen doesn't stop moving and like get to the bottom of the barrel. And this is when it at this point you can do this by yourself, or this is when it helps to have a coach or someone to work with, but you want to talk to this part. So if you are by yourself, I would suggest even sitting down and putting a chair across from you and talking to anger, talking to disgust, talking to being phony, any of those words. Talk directly to it like you would a person. Ask it questions. Ask it about some of the stuff that came up during your free writing, your stream of consciousness journaling. Talk to it. Imagine it talking it back to you and start to get to know the intricate nuances of this aspect of yourself. And then ask yourself how you are like this too. Not if you are like this too, but how are you like this? So, how am I phony? How am I actually an airhead or distracted? Like, really, really own. That's part of it. You own your shadow, you own your projections, you eat them. This is my Jim Deathmar talks about this. He's like, eat your projections, eat them. So, like, you literally bring them back into yourself. So, there's many ways that you can do this, and I really love the idea of ritualizing shadow work. So, you can create a ritual around this where you're actually making a food that for you represents phoniness or laziness or something, and then you eat it, or you infuse a cup of water and you drink it, or you imagine it as this little kernel of light and you bring it into yourself. But in some way, shape, or form, you are examining it, you're looking at it, you're processing it, and then you're saying, this is a part of me,
Mm.
and this is how this is a part of me. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's anything that you want to add to that.
I think I'll comment to say the first time I tried to sit down and do this practice, I thought it sounded totally bonkers.
Loony. Absolutely loony.
Like there was a lot of I had a lot of judgment things that were coming up around this process. It's like, what do you mean you want me to talk to it? Is this really work? Like there was a lot of skepticism and judgment. And so if you're feeling that or we're getting to the point in the episode where you're like, you had me till now, but you're
Hmm.
telling me to do what? That's
Same.
normal. That's okay. That's part of it. It does feel weird initially and awkward. And there is just no way to imagine what will emerge from this dialogue that you have with these parts of yourself until you actually just do it. So bite the bullet, do the thing that feels uncomfortable and stupid, like it's not going to hurt you to try it. And the insights, the wisdom that comes from it, I remember just being blown away. Because I think I had gone into it through like a trigger. So projections and triggers, there's some like overlapping stuff there, right? So like waited to get really activated and upset about something and then use that as my focal point for this exercise. And as I went through, and it was like something about the person. I think if I'm remembering it correctly, there was like maybe some what I perceived as arrogance, like overconfidence, and it was really just steaming me about this other human being, and I was not in a place of empathy because of that. And so I did this interaction with arrogance and with this overconfidence, and through that dialogue was able to see some real limiting beliefs that I had ingrained into myself about what confidence could or should look like, what it meant to be assertive in a space, what was safe there, like all of that stuff emerged. So there's just a lot of gold
Yeah.
that can come up from this dialogue, even though it feels super weird. So just wanted to throw that out and like normalize that it feels weird.
And if you want to get really meta, your reaction to this work is a projection of something happening inside. So if you're like, that's really wacky, or that's too woo woo, or that seems absolutely nuts, look at the judgments, the things that you're
Uh-huh.
saying, because that could be the first thing you work on.
Yes, there's your entryway. That's your
There's your
portal.
entryway. Yeah.
Um,
So, it can feel different, right? And so stick with it, be patient with yourself, allow yourself to be new at this. And yes, it could feel a little bit weird to do on your own, which is why there are amazing people out there to help you, worksheets that can help. We're going to offer you a worksheet. Kayla and I are available to help. Therapists are there to help. So, this is a part of it. And one of the things that I have also worked with arrogance a lot. It's funny that you say that because that's like the example that I have in my notes is about arrogance. But like, if you're in that part where you're talking to it, you're imagining sitting across from arrogance and asking like, who are you, arrogance? What's important to you, arrogance? What do you want from me, arrogance? What are you trying to show me, arrogance? Like maybe there's some gold that is like really important for you to have some strength as a leader and to have some ability and confidence and capacity. And notice what's happening in your body as you do all of this. Like we can get very analytical and mind focused when it comes to shadow work, but there's a lot of treasure in your body too. If your body is like reacting a certain way, notice that because that could be a portal as well. And I want to offer just like a way to take this deeper if you want to, instead of making a dish that represents arrogance, maybe there's like a posture or a series of postures or a song that that like really brings this like cocky arrogance, confidence out. And you're like, I'm going to listen to that for like 5 minutes before I go into a meeting just to play with it. Like you don't have to go and act out this feral, wild arrogance that's been hanging out in the wilderness for 30 years. You could titrate it. You can give yourself tiny little bits of arrogance and just try it on. See what happens when you integrate it in these smallest little amounts.
Yeah, I like that idea too. And it creates this like curiosity and playfulness. And I think that that can't be overstated when you're trying to do this work, like to stay curious, stay non-judgmental, and if there's anything you can do to make it fun or accessible, do it because it isn't necessarily easy
Yeah.
work and hard stuff does emerge. But the intention isn't to make yourself miserable. Like there's so much untapped creativity and like beauty in the shadow. And so whatever you have to do to kind of court these
Yeah,
pieces out, do it.
exactly. So, just one more time for summary, the process is to identify the group or the people that you're disproportionately charged towards, identify what it is exactly that you're charged about, and to engage with it in some way. Maybe you talk to it, maybe it's in some meditative ritual space or through art, but you engage with it. Ask it, who are you? What's important to you? What do you want from me? What are you trying to show me? What gifts do you have for me? And then you bring that aspect back into you by seeing that you are this too and getting very clear about how you are this or how you would like to be this in some way.
The last step, don't skip it.
Don't skip it. Yeah.
That's a big part. You have to
And
reintegrate.
this is where the endurance aspect of it comes in, right? Because this is hard work. And so after a certain point you might be like, okay, I'm done. But don't skip the last part because that's the true integration of shadow.
Yeah, that's where the
Integration meaning
medicine.
like bringing it back into you, bringing it back to wholeness.
Yes. Yeah, we need the gifts there. And if you just leave it as to, oh, well, arrogance had a lot to say,
Yeah.
you're not going to get the full nourishment from these practices. So,
Hmm.
I just want to add on because I'm thinking a little bit. So there's like that's the very formal, kind of shadow work process and the way that it's like most commonly interacted with in Jungian work. But I think there's a lot of other ways that you can like dip a toe into shadow work if you're not ready. If there's way too much resistance and you're about to tune out and go listen to something else,
Yeah.
there are other things you can do to start. Maybe you need to do some lead up. I'm like thinking of it as like a romantic relationship, right? Where like maybe we're dating for a little while and that's like getting a little too serious. And so to start, like there are other entry ways, other places to start to get some depth here. I'm thinking about even just like emotional awareness and emotional integration and recognizing the full spectrum of of feelings that exist. Okay, step one, all of these feelings that exist. These aren't good or bad. Like, what do these feel like for me? The body awareness stuff, huge, right? Being able to tap into
Yeah.
and recognize, because if you haven't done that work, you might not even know when you're triggered, when you're projecting, because you're not in tune with those signals that your body is giving you. So just doing that work. And one more that I think is really important and kind of fun, and it's a lighter entryway, is to do some work on your strengths. So I started doing, I got certified through Gallup to do strengths coaching through their framework, but you don't have to have taken any fancy assessment to dig into your strengths. And oftentimes we disown our strengths. And so this is actually a really playful way to start to engage with our shadow by owning the things that we're good at, getting curious about what comes naturally to us. And that could be a fun place to start.
I love that you bring that in because when I first started doing this work, like with real intent towards my leadership, it came because I became aware that I was a professional chameleon and I was really good at manufacturing belonging by having these personas that I knew would get me results in the world, but weren't genuinely, authentically grounded in me. And so I started to kind of like disown that aspect of myself that I have this ability to be a chameleon. I like disowned that a little bit. It almost became a part of my shadow later in life.
You put
But
it in
then
the
when
bag.
I put it in the bag, I was like, I'm not trying to be a chameleon. I want to be 100% authentic all the time. And but then I did the Gallup strengths years later and found that I have a strength of woo, which is winning others over, which I think is a quality of this ability to be adaptive and chameleon-like in any situation and environment. And that gave me permission to bring that back in a way that was really helpful and useful. And it was a skill that I could employ consciously in my leadership. So I think that's a great idea. And, on the topic of assessments, there some people have a lot of opinions about assessments. I think that the psyche is just too vast and complex to not have some guardrails around the mirrors that we look at. And so if an assessment gives you a mirror upon which to view yourself, maybe for the first time, more power to you. Please go use it. So I love the Gallup strengths. MBTI, people really love that. And there's tons of free personality assessments online like that. There's the Enneagram, that's also really helpful. Human design, gene keys. There's the positive psychology, the saboteurs assessment. Have
Mm.
you tried that one before?
I haven't. I've heard of this a couple
Oh,
times recently though, so it might be the universe is calling me.
it's a good one if you want to get called out on your self-sabotaging behaviors. Yeah,
All right. Well, that's
I
another
mean, just
entryway in.
yeah, look up the I think it's like positive psychology saboteurs assessment. It's an evidence-based assessment. It's great. If you want to learn all the ways that you sabotage yourself. So
Sounds fun.
entryway
I'm
into
in.
shadow
I'm
sounds
gonna do that right after the show.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, again, if we think about the assessment results that we have in front of us, again, thinking about projection as that mechanism to bring us back to wholeness. These things are being projected back to us. And you get to feel into your body, feel into your psyche, and to sense, is this true for me? Does this represent an aspect of myself that I am aware of, that I would like to become aware of? And you're just collecting more and more for the ego to be able to create this cohesive image of itself in your mind. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's perfectly fine and useful.
Yeah, use whatever tools are accessible to you
Yeah.
where you're at right now that makes sense and feel like the step you can take. Because
Yeah.
none of this is going to matter if the first step that you want to take feels way too far and you're going to
Hmm.
put it off for a later date. Like put your toe in like wherever it feels safe and wherever you can evoke curiosity, and then you can deepen from there. All entryways are good entryways, right?
Yep.
Like,
They all lead you back to wholeness. That's the
uh-huh.
good thing about wholeness is it encompasses everything.
Yes. So I'm looking at the time and I know that we can just make any episode a 6 hour episode.
Yeah.
But as
We have
we're
a
like,
propensity for that.
yeah, I love it. But I'm thinking as we wrap up, we've talked a lot about what this is, how to work with it. Um, let's maybe touch on some of the challenges a little bit more and then just kind of end on a tangible note. So, yeah.
Okay.
What are some of the challenges that you've maybe personally experienced or recognized emerge with this as we're encouraging people to dip their toe in and try whatever's accessible? Like, let's be real about what can come up.
So, challenges. If we think about the ego as the part of us that is choosing to listen to this podcast episode, that is choosing to sit down and journal instead of grab a beer or whatever, is choosing to engage in a conscious, intentional development journey. The ego is serving some greater purpose. I would argue, I think you would argue, the ego is serving soul in those moments, is serving the self, is serving the highest potential, is serving spirit. And so, some of the challenges that I think about when engaging in shadow work is an underdeveloped and under-resourced ego. And the challenge here is that doing shadow work does develop and resource the ego, but you have to start with things that aren't going to spiral you too quickly. Or if you do choose to do that, to do it in a therapeutic container that you trust with another person who can hold that disintegration process for you. Uh, Shadow work doesn't always have to be that intense, though. I mean, we've talked about it with a couple of things that can actually be quite enjoyable. So maybe start if it feels more accessible for you to start with the golden shadow. Just like list three people who you admire and why you admire them, and start to play around with the idea that you embody those qualities already and you just haven't fully owned it. Start with something lighter. Um, that would be the biggest challenge that I could think of is like the lack of stamina, the lack of maturation, the lack of capacity. And that's when doing it in a therapeutic container can be really helpful. I also think feedback is really helpful. engaging with conscious feedback with people is a great way to get introduced to shadow aspects. But that means that you have a certain level of trust interrelationally with people in your life, that they know that they can give you honest feedback and you're going to take it responsibly, and you know that they will be truthful and they will not be people pleasing you, and that they will actually give you honest feedback. So there's some interrelational challenges that could be present there, or that you might need to navigate in order to get the feedback. Those are the things that are coming up for me right away. And also perfectionism, I suppose. Feeling like you're not doing it right, so might as well not do it at all, because it's so ethereal. And until you start to get at the hang of it, it's going to feel a little different. It could be really easy to just say, I don't like this. I'm going to go do something else instead. So those are the top challenges for me.
Yeah, I love that the first thing you brought up was the ego maturation, because I think that is such an important piece of this, that if you don't have that foundation, this is going to feel
Yeah.
inaccessible or challenging or scary, unsafe. There's a lot of things that could be brought up around that. And again, the importance that Emily already emphasized in, having a safe container to do that work, especially if, there's really hard stuff. I think obviously trauma is just the other piece, because some people have trauma that they have not even acknowledged is trauma. And I shouldn't say some, I should say many, a lot of us, because we've told ourselves that trauma looks like X, Y, or Z. And if we
Hmm.
don't fall into that category, then we don't have trauma. And so then it must be safe to go this journey alone. And it may feel very unsafe once you start to do this. And you don't know what is going to come up, what emotions, and you need support in a safe container. You need to have relationships that can hold you, whether those are professional or community relationships. So I think just being really aware of the fact that the stuff that's back here that we're talking about pulling up, some of it is from hurt, from wounds, from very real trauma. And we just have to be mindful anytime we're like going into that, that we're bringing the right tools to be self-compassionate in that process. So that's like something you can carry with you, is also the self-compassion piece and the self-forgiveness piece. If you are somebody that's highly self-critical and deals with some of the perfectionism and some of that stuff, there might even need to be some prerequisite work around self-love, and some of those entryways that you could explore first.
Hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking that as you start to get into it, again, the ego is usually the one that initiates this work, because it sees the potential that it's kind of leaving on the table if it doesn't. And so the ego might come in with an immature, almost like a page of wands kind of energy. It's very fiery. It's very like, let's go, we're gonna do it all right now. And it can that the ego can kind of overwhelm the system a little bit. And if you find yourself getting into the work and then getting overwhelmed, it is perfectly okay, intelligent, wise, compassionate, and kind to pull out.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong or broken about that at all. Like we figure out what we can tolerate, and we get to those edges, and then we pull back, we regulate, we get grounded again, and then we go a little bit more in. And it's absolutely okay and healthy and normal to kind of have this push and pull sort of relationship with shadow work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's going to come up and reemerge, and you do build a stamina over time, I think, when it comes to this like relationship with your shadow, right? The way you interface with it intentionally, some of that just grows over time through practice. So it doesn't have to be any certain way to start, and
Mhm.
allow it to come in bits and pieces over time. And also know that there is no done. So if you have an image in your brain of what this is going to look like on the other side, just scrap that right now. That ain't going to be it.
There's no arriving. We do not arrive anywhere.
Yeah, but there, yeah, this is the journey for life, because no matter what you are pulling out and reintegrating, other stuff's getting shoved back there, whether you're realizing it or not, and you're gonna pull it out at a later date, and look at that. So,
Mhm. And it's so life-giving. I want us to like really end on that positive note that this shadow work is what brings us closer to wholeness. It is what makes us feel alive. It is what makes us feel vital and like we are inherently worthy and deserving of this life that we get to have for the short amount of time that we have it. And I think we all deserve to feel that.
I'm glad that you said worthy because I think that's a word I don't know that we've actually used yet in this episode. And it's 100% the reason for this, right? This is a worthiness journey. This is a self-compassion, self-love, integration, authenticity, worthiness journey. It is all of that. And worthiness was something I struggled with a lot when I mean, my whole life, I struggled with it. The first self-help book I ever read was called Unworthy because worthy wasn't even in my vocabulary. Um, and this work really does move you in that direction, and it's the most loving thing you can do for yourself in the world. It's worth it. It's worth the squeeze. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, there's some effort involved here, but yeah, you won't regret it. There's just so much beauty and potential and aliveness there.
Hmm. So it is, so it shall be.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Is anything else emerging or are we feeling complete, Emily?
That feels complete for now.
Okay. We will have some resources for you in
Yeah.
the show notes. Please pick something from today and give it a shot. Get curious about it. Just allow yourself to sit with these ideas. Maybe that's just the first step. Like Emily said, noticing what your thoughts are about these concepts. Allow yourself to be curious because it's just so powerful. And you have two people right here available to you whose contact information will also be in the show notes if you were to need support and want to engage in this work with somebody who is a little more versed in this terrain. So, yeah, with that, I will ask everybody to just take such good care of yourselves and love on yourselves a little extra hard wherever you're at in
Mhm.
life today as you're listening. Figure out something that you can do that feels good for your soul. And thank you, Emily, so much for sharing this conversation with me. It's been a long time coming. It's been beautiful. I've loved every moment.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. I've loved it too, and I love you. And yes, take care out there. And a little's enough. It's always enough. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Goodbye, my friends. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.